June 1st, 1926, Los Angeles County Hospital. A baby girl was born. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, was 24 years old, unmarried, unstable, barely able to take care of herself. The baby had no father, at least not one who would claim her. The birth certificate listed Edward Mortenson as the father, but he'd left before the baby was born. He wanted nothing to do with them. The baby was named Norma Jeane Mortenson, not Marilyn Monroe. That name wouldn't exist for another 20 years. Norma Jeane was born into a world that didn't want her, and for the next 16 years, she'd be reminded of that every single day. This is the story of Marilyn Monroe's childhood, a childhood so traumatic, so painful, that it would haunt her for the rest of her life. Because Marilyn Monroe didn't become a star despite her past. She became a star because of it. Because she spent her entire life trying to be loved, trying to be wanted, trying to prove she mattered. But it was never enough. Because the little girl inside never healed. Norma Jeane never escaped. Gladys Baker couldn't take care of her baby. She was mentally unstable, depressed, possibly schizophrenic. She worked as a film cutter at a movie studio, but she barely made enough money to survive. So 2 weeks after Norma Jeane was born, Gladys made a decision. She gave her baby to a foster family, the Bolenders, a religious couple in Hawthorne, California. Norma Jeane would live with them for the next 7 years. But she was never their daughter. She was just a paycheck. The state paid foster families to take in children, and the Bolenders needed the money. "Don't get too attached," Mrs. Bolender would tell her other foster children. "She's not staying forever." Norma Jeane grew up feeling like a guest in someone else's home, temporary, unwanted, waiting to be sent away. Every few weeks, Gladys would visit. She'd show up unannounced, disheveled, unstable. She'd hug Norma Jeane too tight, cry, promise to take her home soon. "Mommy's going to get better," she'd say. "Then we'll be together, just you and me." But it never happened. Gladys would disappear again, and Norma Jeane would be left wondering if her mother even loved her. In 1933, when Norma Jeane was 7 years old, something unexpected happened. Gladys got better. Or at least she seemed to. She got a better job, saved some money, and decided she was ready to be a mother. She took Norma Jeane back. They moved into a small house in Hollywood. For the first time in her life, Norma Jeane had a real home with her real mother. "We're going to be a family," Gladys said, "just like I promised." Norma Jeane was so happy. Finally, she belonged somewhere. Finally, someone wanted her. But it didn't last. A few months later, Gladys had a breakdown, a complete mental collapse. She started hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. She'd scream in the middle of the night, cry for hours. She couldn't work, couldn't function. One day she tried to hurt herself. Norma Jeane found her, saw everything. A 7-year-old girl, watching her mother lose her mind. The authorities were called. Gladys was taken away to a psychiatric hospital. And Norma Jeane? She was sent back into foster care. But this time, there was no family waiting, no Bolenders to take her in. So she was sent to the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society, an orphanage for unwanted children. Children with no parents, no families, no futures. Norma Jeane wasn't technically an orphan. Her mother was alive, but she might as well have been dead because she wasn't coming back. The orphanage was cold, institutional. Over 100 children packed into cramped dormitories. Not enough food, not enough attention, not enough love. Norma Jeane was assigned a bed, a small locker for her belongings, and a number. She wasn't a person anymore. She was just another unwanted child. At night, she'd cry into her pillow, trying to be quiet so the other kids wouldn't hear. But they all cried, every single one of them, because they all knew the truth. Nobody wanted them. Years later, Marilyn would tell an interviewer, "I used to think I was the only person in the world. Nobody loved me. Nobody cared if I lived or died. I was invisible. The orphanage was run by strict rules. Wake up at 6, make your bed, go to school, come back. Chores, dinner, bed, repeat. No affection, no warmth, just survival. Norma Jeane tried to be good, tried to follow the rules, tried to make the adults like her, but it didn't matter. She was just one of 100 kids, forgettable. Every Saturday, families would come to the orphanage, looking to adopt. The children would line up, hoping, praying. Maybe today someone would choose them. Norma Jeane would stand there, smiling, trying to look pretty, trying to look lovable. But nobody ever chose her. Week after week, month after month, she'd watch other kids get picked, get taken home, get loved, and she'd go back to her bed, alone and visible. After 2 years in the orphanage, Norma Jeane was placed with another foster family, then another, then another. Over the next 7 years, she lived in 11 different homes, 11 different families. None of them kept her for long. Some families were kind, some were neglectful, and some were dangerous. When Norma Jeane was 8 years old, she was placed with a family in Hollywood, a man and his wife. They seemed nice at first. They had a big house, plenty of food. They told her she could stay as long as she wanted, but the man had other intentions. One night, when his wife was out, he came into Norma Jeane's room. He locked the door, and he hurt her. An 8-year-old girl, defenseless, terrified. Norma Jeane tried to tell someone, the social worker, the foster mother, but nobody believed her. "You're making up stories," they said. "He's a good man. Why would you lie?" So she stayed quiet, and it happened again and again. Years later, Marilyn would rarely talk about this, but in a 1955 interview, she said, "I learned very early that people don't want to hear the truth, especially when it's ugly." Eventually, Norma Jeane was moved to another home, but the damage was done. She learned that her body wasn't her own, that men could take what they wanted, that she had no power. This trauma would follow her into adulthood, into Hollywood, into every relationship she ever had. By the time Norma Jeane was 16, she'd been passed around so many times that she felt like damaged goods, used, unwanted, broken. She was living with a family friend named Grace McKee. Grace had been close to Gladys before her breakdown. She'd promised to look after Norma Jeane, but Grace was getting married, and her new husband didn't want a teenage girl living with them. "I can't keep you," Grace told her. "You have to find somewhere else to go." Norma Jeane panicked. Where? Where am I supposed to go?" "Back to the orphanage, I guess." Norma Jeane couldn't go back. She couldn't live in that place again. The loneliness, the despair. She'd rather die. So she made a decision, a desperate decision. She'd get married. There was a boy, Jim Dougherty, a neighbor, 20 years old, handsome, kind. He liked Norma Jeane. Grace arranged it. "If you marry Jim, you won't have to go back to the orphanage." Norma Jeane was 16 years old. She didn't love Jim. She barely knew him. But she said yes, because marriage was better than the orphanage. On June 19th, 1942, Norma Jeane Mortenson became Norma Jeane Dougherty, a child bride, escaping one prison by entering another. The marriage lasted 4 years. Jim was a good man. He tried to make her happy. But Norma Jeane was miserable. She felt trapped, like she'd traded one foster home for another. Jim wanted a traditional wife, someone to cook, clean, stay home. But Norma Jeane wanted more. She wanted to be seen, to be loved, to matter. In 1944, Jim joined the Merchant Marine. He was sent overseas, and Norma Jeane was alone again. She got a job at a factory, building airplanes for the war effort. It was hard work, long hours. But she liked it. She liked being around people, being part of something. One day, a photographer came to the factory. He was taking pictures for a magazine, propaganda photos. Women supporting the war effort. He saw Norma Jeane, and he stopped. "You," he said, "I need to photograph you." Norma Jeane was confused. Why me? Because you're beautiful. Nobody had ever called her beautiful before. Not like that. Not like it mattered. The photographer took her pictures, and they were stunning. Norma Jeane had something, a quality, a magnetism. The camera loved her. The photos were published. And suddenly, people noticed her. Modeling agencies called. Photographers wanted to work with her. For the first time in her life, Norma Jeane felt wanted, not for what she could do, but for who she was. This was the beginning, the moment Norma Jeane realized she could be more than a foster kid, more than a child bride, more than invisible. In 1946, Norma Jeane filed for divorce. Jim was devastated, but she'd made up her mind. She was going to be a model, an actress, a star. She dyed her hair blonde, changed her name. Norma Jeane Mortenson became Marilyn Monroe. It wasn't just a name change. It was a transformation, a rebirth. She was killing Norma Jeane, the unwanted girl, the foster kid, the victim. Marilyn Monroe was born, and Marilyn was everything Norma Jeane wasn't. Confident, sexy, powerful, loved. But Norma Jeane never really died. She was still there, hidden underneath, crying, scared, alone. Marilyn's rise to fame was fast. By the early 1950s, she was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Movies, magazine covers, millions of fans. But she was haunted by her past. The orphanage, the foster homes, the abuse, the rejection. She suffered from depression, anxiety, insomnia. She took pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to function. She had relationships, marriages, but she couldn't trust anyone. Every time someone got close, she'd push them away, or they'd leave her, just like everyone always did. So, I'm afraid of being abandoned, she told her therapist, because I've been abandoned my whole life. She wanted children, desperately. She wanted to be the mother she never had, but she had multiple miscarriages. Her body couldn't carry a baby to term. Maybe I'm not meant to be a mother, she said. Maybe I'm too broken. In the last years of her life, Marilyn tried to confront her past. She started therapy, talked about her childhood, the trauma, the pain, but it was too late. The damage was too deep. Norma Jeane was still that little girl, standing in the orphanage, waiting for someone to choose her, waiting for someone to love her. On August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died. She was 36 years old. Some say it was suicide, some say it was murder. But in a way, it doesn't matter, because Marilyn had been dying her whole life, slowly, painfully. From the moment she was born, unwanted. Years after her death, people would say, Marilyn had everything: fame, beauty, money. Why wasn't she happy? But they didn't understand. Marilyn didn't have everything. She didn't have the one thing she needed most: love, real love, unconditional love. She spent her entire life trying to earn it, trying to be pretty enough, sexy enough, famous enough. But it was never enough, because the little girl inside still believed she was unlovable. Norma Jeane Mortenson was born on June 1st, 1926. Unwanted, unloved, abandoned. She became Marilyn Monroe, the most famous woman in the world, worshipped by millions. But she died the same way she lived, alone. Because fame doesn't heal childhood trauma. Success doesn't erase abandonment. And all the love in the world can't fill a void created in the first years of life. Marilyn Monroe was a star, but Norma Jeane? She was just a little girl who never stopped waiting for her mother to come back. And she never did.